Hello there, my name's Shelby. I'm originally from Rhyl in North Wales, and today I'm going to be talking about the Oxford admissions process. Most of this is focused on Oxford, but it's also relevant for Cambridge, and there's some good advice in here as well for any of those top universities, those Russell Group universities. This is a picture of me graduating from Oxford in 2016. I have read English here for 3 years, and I'm now currently in Oxford. I'm in one of the colleges, New College, which makes up the University of Oxford. There's about 30, just over 30 colleges overall. New College is one of them. I work there now as the outreach officer. I graduated from Trinity College, which is just over the road. I like to show this picture. It's of me and my family on the day I graduated. My mum is on the far left, then my auntie, my dad, and my uncle. And I like to show this because you don't really do this process on your own. You do it with the love and support of those around you. I certainly did. And everyone in this picture, apart from me, doesn't have any qualifications, not even a GCSE. So you certainly don't need to come from a family background that's been to university before. It's not necessary. Right. Most people, when they think about application processes, they might think of it in this way. I'm going to talk about the sort of group details a bit more, but really the application process starts much earlier than this. It starts with your course choice. And my advice is always pick something that you love, pick something that you're genuinely interested in. You're going to put in a much stronger application for a subject that you love rather than a subject that you think, oh yeah, I guess that's a good idea. I suppose I'll make loads of money from that kind of subject. It's really not the case. You're much better picking something that you love. This is some of the courses that we have here at Oxford. The trick is to pick the course first, not the universities. It's all very well thinking you want to go to Oxford, but that's no good if you want to study architecture because we don't have an undergraduate course for architecture. If you want to do that, go over to Cambridge. They've got a brilliant one. So by all means, have a look at the courses available and pick the one that you love. When I was in year 12, I thought you could only do a subject that you'd already done at A level. So I had done English at A level. I really enjoyed it. So I went for English at university. If I'd had my time again, I loved my English course, but I think I would have really enjoyed archaeology and anthropology. And looking back, I could have put in a really pretty decent application to it as well, but I wasn't brave enough and I didn't know enough about the process. So don't make my mistake. Feel free to apply for something that you haven't done at A level or something brand new. Definitely worth reading around the subject though to make sure you definitely do want to do it. So let's say that you have decided on a course, and let's say that we do one of those courses at Oxford. This is the timeline that we're looking at. It's talking about 2022 and 2023 here, but if you're in year 12 now, you'd be looking at 2024. So just ignore the years for the moment. The months are the important thing. You'd start working on your UCAS application from June, and your UCAS application encompasses your personal statement, teacher reference, GCSE grades, your predicted A-level grades. Remember, you're applying with your predicted grades, not your actual A-level grades. And your personal statement. Everyone gets a bit wound up about personal statement. There's no need to do that. I'll explain why in a second. They're not the be all and end all. Certainly worth thinking about, but it's not the end of the world. You would submit your UCAS application by mid-October, and then the next step, which is unusual for other universities. Other universities don't have admissions tests, but the next step for Oxford and Cambridge would be an admissions test of some form. Most of our courses ask for an admissions test. Then you might be asked for some written work, so maybe English or humanities they would ask for written work. They're probably not going to ask for written work for something like biology. That makes sense because you're not probably going to be writing too many essays for them. Once we've looked at all that, we would then decide whether to ask you to come for an interview. That would happen at some point in December. They're normally 20 to 30 minutes. It's a conversation about your academic subject, so it's not going to be like a job interview where we might ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time or something like that. It wouldn't be like that. It would be questions about your academic subject. And then finally, you would find out whether you have an offer in January. So it's pretty quick. Let's talk about each individual element a little bit more. You apply with your GCSE grades. You also apply with your predicted A-level grades, not your actual A-level grades, because then we wouldn't find those out until results day, and that's a little bit too late. We need to figure out earlier, so we would apply with your predicted A-level grades. You need to be applying with predicted A-level grades that are in the right range. So if you're predicted somewhere between 3 A's and 2 A stars and an A, you should definitely apply for Oxford depending on the subject, because that's our entry requirement range. If you're just outside of that range, something like AAB, it's not worth applying to Oxford because we're very strict on those A-level requirements. There's still plenty of excellent Russell Group universities that you can apply to with those grades. Your personal statement, the success of the personal statement really is on how focused you are on your subject. So you need to be talking about your subject in your personal statement, why you like it, what it is about it that you like. And to evidence your curiosity about that subject, your interest in that subject, you need to have done a couple of supercurricular activities. You don't have to, but it really does help, and it makes life easier if you have done some of those supercurricular activities. What on earth is a supercurricular activity? Well, it's something that you do in your spare time that relates to your academic subject. So it might be reading, it might be listening to a podcast, it might be watching a documentary, you might have watched a YouTube video. All of that stuff counts as supercurricular. So that's what we want to hear about on your personal statement, why you like the subject and what you've done to show a little bit of wider reading, a bit of wider interest to show off that particular interest. Written work, as I've mentioned before, you might be asked to submit some written work. Teacher's reference, you'll definitely have one of those. So teacher reference, GCSE grades, predicted A-level grades and personal statement, you will apply to university with all of those. For Oxford in particular, we would probably ask you for an admissions test, and we might ask you for your written work. And then the final element of that, as far as Oxford and Cambridge is concerned, would be the interview. Now we look at all of these aspects together, so don't worry if you feel like your GCSE grades aren't as strong as they could be. There may be other elements of your application that are much stronger and they compensate for that. So don't worry too much if you feel like one area isn't as strong as it could be. The one thing I will say is your predicted A-level grades need to be within that range. What is? I've got a little table here for us to look at. And as you can see, there is a range. So if we look at biology, you've got to have A star AA. And that A star, your predicted A star, must be in a science or maths. There's actually a couple of compulsory A levels that you have to take as well. So you can't apply to biology at Oxford if you're not doing biology at A level. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So you need to be doing biology and either chemistry, physics, or maths. So you could apply with biology, chemistry, and art. You could apply with biology, physics, and English. That would be fine. As long as you're getting those initial two, it's fine. There's no admissions test for biology and there's no written work need to be submitted. That's great. And then there are some numbers at the end for the success rate. I don't like the numbers too much, but some people find them helpful, and you can find those numbers available on the Oxford website for any of the subjects. Just to point out, if 100 people applied to biology, then 55 of them would be interviewed and 17 of them would be successful. It's not 17% of 55%. I know that can be a little bit confusing. If we look at a slightly different subject, history, 3 A's, no A stars in sight, and compulsory A levels, well, there are none. It's recommended that you do history, but there's plenty of people that apply every year that have a strong application without history as an A level. It's recommended, but it's not the end of the world if you're not doing it at A level. We ask for an admissions test, the history aptitude test, and one piece of written work. So these entry requirements will be slightly different depending on the subject. And there might be some compulsory A levels that might surprise you. There might be some that are surprising in their lack of compulsory A levels. So, for example, for law at Oxford, there's no compulsory A levels. We ask that you do at least one subject in essay writing, but it's not necessary. Whereas for something like computer science, you definitely need to be doing maths to apply to computer science. Not just at Oxford, but at many universities, they will ask for maths at A level. That covers the entry requirements. I do recommend having a look around and doing a little bit of research on these courses. Make sure it's something that you love, but make sure you know what the course is about. And something to keep in mind, even if you go through this whole application process and you still don't get in, the application process itself is really helpful for some life skills and some good writing skills in there as well, and some interview skills as well. Wherever you go in life, if it's applying for a job or whatever it is, it's never a bad thing to have some good interview skills under your belt. So you might find that the process itself is very rewarding, even if it doesn't end with an offer from Oxford. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening, and best of luck to you all.
Croeso mawr, a very, very warm welcome to you to this Oxbridge Admissions Information, Advice and Guidance question and answer session. You've just had the opportunity to see an overview of the video talking about the admissions process, but now it's University Challenge time. Is it Oxford against Cambridge? Oh no, it's not. It's Oxford and Cambridge responding together to questions today. So there's no scoring of points, panel, okay? So it's just an open and honest reflection on the questions that you, Seren people, have sent in to us. And thank you for those of you who sent questions in as soon as you registered this year, showing how keen you are. So I won't introduce the panel, they will introduce themselves. So briefly, panel members, and I'll start with one of the most experienced Seren people that I've come across in Seren. It's Sandy Mill. Tell us who you are, Sandy.
Diolch yn fawr, siamai. Sandy Mill dwi'n gweithio fel tutor dyfyniadau mewn Coleg Sydney Sussex Prefecture Cambridge. I think that's right. My Welsh is absolutely terrible. My name is Sandy Mill. I'm the admissions director at Sydney Sussex College at the University of Cambridge. Back once again for the Seren conference, and it's a delight to be here.
And really good to have you with us as well. And I'm going to a new Seren face for me now. Catherine Phillips, tell us who you are, Catherine.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Phillips. I'm Seren alumni. I'm a third year history student at Mansfield College, Oxford. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be here to try and help everyone.
And I'm sure that you will, Catherine. I'll next go to Jason. Tell us who you are, Jason.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm also a Seren alumni. I'm in my third year studying psychological and behavioural sciences at Churchill College, Cambridge.
Diolch yn fawr, croeso mawr, Jason. Jonathan, now I know you've done a lot with Seren, but it's our first acquaintance. So croeso, Jonathan, tell us who you are.
Diolch, Glenda. Croeso canis iawn, pawb. It's wonderful to spend time with you this afternoon. My name is Jonathan Padley. I am the lead admissions tutor of Churchill College in the University of Cambridge. Before I came into this role, I worked as a teacher in South Wales in further education and was involved in the project that gave rise to Seren. It's my first time at the Seren conference. I'm very excited.
I remember my first Seren conference and I was equally excited, Jonathan, and I'm still here. Yma o hyd, that's the song that everybody's singing at the moment, but let's forget about the David Iwan song. Jacques, we've known each other for a few years now. Tell everybody who you are.
Hello everybody, my name is Jacques and I'm a third year undergraduate here at St Catherine's College in Oxford. I'm studying maths, but I'm originally from Cardiff.
Croeso mawr, Jacques. Great. Well, I have got my questions with me. They're on the clipboard hiding here. The first question goes to, I'll start with you, Jonathan. And Sandy, you're welcome to butt in on this one as well. The question is, how do Oxbridge admissions differ to admissions to other British universities? How do you sum that up?
Yeah, so really great question. I mean, in one sense, folks, the differences aren't as great as you might think, right? The application process is broadly similar. As with other UK universities, you might be required to sit some sort of admissions assessment as part of your process. As with other UK universities, you might be required to send in some written work in, for example, a humanities subject. And as with other universities, you might be required to attend an interview as part of the overall process. So that's kind of similar, right? The things which are different, I think, are the process is relatively compressed and begins relatively early. So you apply, make the initial stage of your application by October the 15th in your year of application. So that's relatively earlier than some of the UK universities. And I suppose the other thing which really differentiates our approach is our kind of really single-minded focus upon identifying people who are academically brilliant. And it's really simple, actually. We are focused upon, in all these things that I've spoken about and across the totality of your application, on finding really able young people who want to come and study at very good universities. Final thing, and this is important, is this is not so much about admissions, but it's about the way we teach. We are differentiated, as you may be aware, by the fact that we offer what Oxford call tutorials, what Cambridge calls supervisions, as a standard part of our teaching. So spending time with an academic and one or maybe two or maybe three students having detailed conversations about your work on a multiple times a week basis, right? Your interview, I think, if you come to Oxford or Cambridge, is going to be a little bit like that. You're going to send in a load of helpful information, and there's going to be something which is a bit like a tutorial or a supervision on that, because that then gives us information about will you thrive on the way we teach, and also, perhaps equally as important, it tells you whether you're going to thrive on the way we teach.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, Sandy, I know you had your hand up. And can you add to whatever you're going to say? Because you've touched on it, Jonathan, but there is another question. How long does the whole process take? So could you answer that one as well, Sandy?
So we have the earlier application deadline at Oxford and Cambridge for all of our courses. And it's also notable if you're applying for medicine, veterinary medicine or dentistry at any UK university, you'll also have the same application deadline of October the 15th. That compares to an early January application deadline for all other universities. And typically with the Oxford and Cambridge process, actually we'll be doing interviews in early December, and we'll be getting your results usually by the end of January. And there's a set date for this that gets set every year, so you don't have to be waiting around and worrying. How do you deal with this additional sort of slight complexity? Be prepared. Have a look on the websites for the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge. We have a wealth of information about all of these deadlines, all of these dates. It's all down to be as clear as we can possibly make it for you to make sure that you are prepared as possible. So start looking on those websites early if you're considering these universities. Get those details and do check them throughout the year, just in case something changes. And finally, it is worth noting that, as Dr. Padley said, there are these additional things like additional admissions assessments or written work that you might be required to do. And those can vary at Oxford and Cambridge by college. So once you know which college you might be looking for, look on the individual college websites and they'll tell you details about what the written work needs to be if it's required in your arts and humanities subject, or which assessments you might have to take. All of that interview we try and make as public as possible in order to make sure that it's out there. No one is going to be advantaged or disadvantaged by our processes at all. But the one thing you do have to do is take the initiative and go on the website and make sure you've got all the details that you need.
Diolch yn fawr, Sandy. Yes, it is a long process. The next question, and I'm not going to get Jonathan and Sandy to answer this one. How to choose between Oxford and Cambridge? Now, we've got two from one university and one from another. And I just want to know, how did you choose? Jason, how did you choose between Oxford and Cambridge?
Yeah, so I'd say do definitely visit both cities. I feel like Hades, like the vibe is just quite different. With Cambridge, it feels like sort of like an overgrown town, whereas Oxford, I feel like is much more like, I don't know, a university within a city. And so I'd suggest like, yeah, anybody who's trying to make this decision, go to the universities themselves and like get a feel for like, yeah, where you'll be spending the next 3, 4, maybe even more years. Yeah.
Diolch, Jason. Katrin, what about you? What made you decide on which?
Well, it was quite simple, really, in the sense that I wasn't really 100% sure that I was going to apply. And then my logic was, if it's as intense as everyone says it is, I want my mum and dad to be able to come and visit me like quicker. So I was like, I'll go to Oxford because it's not as far away. But I honestly don't think either or. I think wherever you do end up, you're going to love it regardless. And I think that's the same with colleges. One of my teachers, I was fretting about what college to pick, and my teacher was like, wherever you end up, you're going to end up thinking it's the best place. And I think that's very true to a degree.
Yeah, do your research. Know where you feel comfortable. You talked about your parents, they're wanting them to be near. My daughter went to St Andrews. What does that say about me? But I won't ask you to answer that one. Jacques, with you, how did you choose between Oxford and Cambridge?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I think for me, my choice was made a little bit easier in that when studying maths, between the two universities, there's a different admissions test. Cambridge take the STEP admissions test, and Oxford, you have to take the MAT. And a key difference in that is when you sit the exam. So for Oxford applicants, you'd sit the exam towards the end of October, which is before interviews. And for Cambridge applicants taking the STEP papers, you sit that at around the same time as your A-level exams. So in the summer following. And for me, it was quite a sort of clear choice that I didn't want to overload myself around the time of A-levels and possibly sacrifice one at the expense of the other. And that was a big sort of factor in me deciding to apply for Oxford over Cambridge. I actually did visit Cambridge and not Oxford. So I think I would have liked to have visited both in advance, but I do agree with the sentiment that wherever you end up, you'll get along with it most of the time. And almost everyone I've met has got a strong affinity for their college and they think it's the best college. So chances are that'll happen to you too.
Thank you, Jacques. Sandy.
One important thing to consider as well, and this actually impacted my application way back in the day. Now we're talking early 2000s, but they do offer different courses at Oxford and at Cambridge. So for me, I was wanting to study a philosophy undergraduate course, and Oxford doesn't do a pure philosophy course. It does the PPE, philosophy, politics and economics all together, whereas Cambridge has a pure philosophy course. So do look at the courses and the course content to see which one is going to be right for you. It may be that there are different modules between them, or certain bits of learning happen in different ways. So make sure that can be a really key indicator. It's not in this case that Oxford was any better than Cambridge, but Cambridge was better for me because it did the course that I wanted to do.
Again, it goes back to that research of finding out what is so special about whichever college and university, and therefore that to suit you, like the location, to make you feel that you're in the right place for you, isn't it? Thank you, Sandy. Jonathan, you talked about different aspects of the process. The next question is, what section, if there is a section of the application process, do Oxford focus more on? What is the most important part of an application?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. And it's important to dispel a myth here, folks, because there is no one component that is any more important in terms of an academic admissions process to Oxford or Cambridge than any other, right? Now, from a student's perspective, I get that this can be very hard to understand because you submit your UCAS form, you possibly send in some additional information in October, and then chronologically, the last part of the process in which you engage typically happens in the start of December, which is if you are called to an academic interview. And there's kind of this sense or myth out there, I think, that what happens is that we go through a process of sifting people before interview, and then it's all or bust on the interview. And that is absolutely not true. It's really important to say this is not true. Your interview is one component amongst many. And what you may find, I think, certainly on the Cambridge website, but probably on the Oxford one as well, is this reference to what we refer to as holistic admissions. In other words, considering the candidate as best as we can in their entirety. That means looking at your GCSE track record. That means looking at your A-level or IB predictions. That means looking at your personal statement, the ways that you say that you are extending yourself. That means looking at your teacher reference. You know, does your teacher identify you as a good student in school or an outstanding student in school, or indeed occasionally the best student in school? These are really important data. You know, what is the caliber of your writing in the written work that you submit if it's submitted in Welsh, which is not uncommon for people who are obviously in Welsh medium education. You know, you still would run a translation into English. So what is the caliber of your writing in English? You know, how well do you do on a standardized admissions assessment that is set against global competitors? And then also, how well do you do in an interview, which is meant in some ways, as I've suggested, to simulate the way in which we teach? Now, that's and then, right? Okay, it's one component, and I just want to reiterate this again. I just talked you through a lot of the data we consider, and there are other things that we consider as well. You know, we consider people's postcode background, data to do with their school background, so what their educational experience, what their socioeconomic context is meant to be like, and no one factor amongst these predominates. I have to say, you know, hand on heart, these are human decisions that we are making. We are weighing up as much empirical data as we possibly can, but we are ultimately making human decisions. And is it the case that every year that more outstanding applicants apply to Oxford and Cambridge than we have places available? Absolutely it is. Could we fill probably 2 more Oxford and Cambridges perfectly easily from the application fields we get? Certainly that's true as well. So ultimately, not getting into Oxford or Cambridge may not be something which particularly reflects negatively upon you. It is simply a recognition of the fact that this is a competitive process in which the field is absolutely extraordinary, but absolutely extraordinary in a way, folks, which comprises people like you also being absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you. Yes, I've got the best on screen, haven't I? You've talked about being the best in class. I've got the best people on screen today. Now, there's a question here from one of the students, and don't be shy in answering this, Catherine, Jacques, and Jason. It talks about what makes students stand out in their applications. How can I match and surpass, going back to being that best, the standards of my competitors? Catherine, how did you try to persuade people that you deserved that place that you obviously got?
I think one of the biggest things to remember going into this process is that it needs to be for you. So like, I think you shouldn't be thinking about other people. And I think I can't stress this enough. It needs to come from you. Like, you can't be having parents or external pressure in school. Like, it literally needs to be solely for you. So I think of it as a really independent process. If you start thinking about competing with other people, I think that you're going down the wrong route. You just need to show that you're really interested and academically engaged, and that doesn't mean that you need to have read crazy academic texts at this point, but like, I don't know, for my personal statement, I like picked one book and then just kind of based it on that and tried to write it a bit like an essay of stuff that I was interested in. So I think in that sense, just try and show that you'll really want to be there. And they don't want the finished product. Like, I'm a third year and I'm still not a finished product at all. So I think that's the case. It's just got to come from you and be something that you really want and something that no one else is putting pressure on you to do.
Your USP, Catherine, diolch, well said. Jacques, was that your approach as well?
I do think that's a very good sentiment to have. And I think showing that passion that you have for your subject is such a key part of our application process in writing a personal statement, in preparing to apply. You really want to sort of cultivate that passion that you have for the subject you're hoping to apply for. And that does mean nerding out and looking into your subject beyond the hours of school and really going sort of a lot deeper than you may otherwise do just based on the curriculum of your school. I feel it's really important to have that time for exploration, to have that time for sort of personal exploration within your subject, and then to really convey that across to whoever will be on the other side of the screen reading your application.
Diolch yn fawr, Jacques. Jason, were you nodding there?
Yes, no, I was just thinking, I very much echo, Catherine's sentiment, because I think what makes you stand out by definition is going to be very individual, and it's going to be very individual. And I think, being honest with yourself and thinking, what is it about this particular subject do I actually, really like? Part of, you dedicating, perhaps quite a bit of time researching a very particular area or like reading more about it is going to be, your genuine interest for it. And I'd say, think about that and you use that to your favor. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. Sandy, I'm going to come to you now. This particular question is directed at Cambridge, but let's change Cambridge to Oxbridge. How hard is it to get into Oxbridge? Simple question, not an easy answer.
I think it is quite an easy answer. It's difficult. Let's not make any bones about it. Let's not try and sugarcoat it. If we're going purely statistically, we get about, on average overall, 6 applicants for every place that we have. And in some very competitive subjects, it's in fact far more than that. We are dealing with some of the most talented students from across Wales, from across the whole of the UK, from across the world, who are all hoping to come and study at these wonderfully august institutions that teach in a very special way, that have some of the best research facilities in the world, and I'm even counting Oxford in that. You know, there is a lot of competition, but you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. You've got 5 choices on that UCAS form. One of them can be for Oxford and Cambridge, and that means you've got 4 others, which you're going to have 4 other brilliant universities, and probably at least one good safety choice there as well. If you think that you are going to thrive in this one-on-one or small group to one teaching environment that we offer that very few other places in the world do, if you think the facilities that we've got on offer in terms of practicals in the sciences, the libraries, the teachers and the world-leading academics that you're going to be working with, and of course, most importantly, the community of learners within the college and within your departments of some of the most talented people in the world who you will geek out about with your subject to your heart's content and beyond. Do you think that's for you? It is worth that shot. And please bear this in mind. When I say that it's a 1 in 6 chance, you are not rolling dice. Okay, this is not as simple as doing that. Trust yourself, bet on yourself. You are, if you are here and part of Seren, you're an astounding student, one of the most talented that Wales has got to offer. That means you have got the ability to go to any top university in the country, and that means any top university in the world, and that is powerful. If you think that this is something you want, go for it. Don't let it be something that later in life you think, oh, I wish I'd given that a shot. And don't be scared of failure. Failure is very natural in life. And I know that the world, media, and even the way that the exam systems are set up in this country tell us that failure is not an option. Failure is a terrible thing, but it's not. We have ups and downs in life all the time. Nobody gets everything absolutely perfect. Nothing goes all our way. Don't let fear of failure stop you from going for what you want, because, in that instance, the real failure is not trying for the things that you want and giving yourself that opportunity. Give it the shot that you deserve as one of the top students in Wales, if it's going to be the right course for you, if the teaching system is right for you, if you feel like this is a place that you're going to thrive. And if you decide for those reasons that maybe you don't want to make an application, those are the best reasons not to. If you think, actually, this is not my style of teaching, the courses aren't right for me, brilliant. Go to another top university and do amazing things there as well, and you'll have made the right choices for the right reason. And the last thing I'll say is, don't let a stereotype stop you. Some people think that people like us, or whatever value of us is, says the one Englishman in the room, stops us from doing the things that we want to do. Jonathan and I have seen across the years now great success from Welsh students from Seren getting into Oxford and Cambridge. We are seeing more and more Welsh students coming to this university, carving out their place and leaving their mark. We see that success from every hub, every single year now. Why not you?
Ardderchog, what a passionate response there to a question that, was easy to answer for Sandy, but diolch yn fawr, Sandy. Mae yna gwestiwn Cymraeg, there is a Welsh question which I will translate to, but I'll read it out in Welsh. Faint o ddarllen uwch gwricwlaidd sydd angen I gwneud ar gyfer gwneud cais I Oxbridge? So basically, there's how much extracurricular reading do you need to do to get into Oxbridge? And maybe we could bring in extracurricular activities as well there, Jonathan. Can I come to you?
Thanks. Yes, certainly. Yeah. So one of the things that you might notice, folks, when you go out on your university explorations is the differentiation that universities make between what we refer to as extracurricular and supercurricular activities, which in a nutshell is extracurricular, not related to your chosen curriculum area, supercurricular, building on your current studies such that you know a bit more about your chosen curriculum area. Jacques a moment ago mentioned nerding out, right? Nerding out is consonant with supercurricular study, supercurricular reading, supercurricular exploration. And in answer to the question, how much supercurricular reading, study, exploration do you have to do? As much as you want and as much as you feel able to do. right? People's circumstances are different, and for all sorts of very, very good reasons. But I think irrespective of your background, I think if you're going to come to a university like this one, where effectively you're going to be studying your degree as your full-time job, ideally, you want to have done something which evidences that you have tested that vocation. So, for example, if you want to come and study maths, ideally, you would be doing quite a bit more maths than you would be just doing your A-level maths and A-level further maths if further maths is available to you, right? Because that's the kind of foundation, and you want to build something on the foundation. Equally, if you want to come and study Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, or philosophy, or economics, or psychology, or whatever it is, we kind of hope you be reading around those areas beyond what you're doing in school or college, because those things are like the way that you would go about testing your vocation for your field, and then evidencing that you've got that vocation. You know, some universities will tell you that you need a lot of work experience before you come to university. We won't in the overwhelming majority of subjects, with the possible exception of medicine. And the reason, folks, that if you're applying to medicine, you go out and you try and test if you're someone who's interested in caring, is that in order to be a medic, you've got to be a really good scientist who cares about people. You can be a really good scientist and not care about people at all, right? It's great. Okay, so, you know, if you don't want to be a medic, that's completely fine. But if you're going to be a medic, you've got to do both. Either way round, we'd like some evidence that you're a good scientist. And the same is true across other subjects, right? The thing which is important is that supercurricular exploration you do, howsoever much of it that you do, gives some evidence that you've thought really carefully about the thing for which you're applying and you genuinely want to do it.
Jason, did you do any of the activities, you know, that Jonathan is alluding to there in terms of your preparation for interview or tests for Oxbridge?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, with my subject, I applied to study psychology. It mainly was like even just looking on the Wikipedia page and seeing like all the different, you know, subfields of psychology, looking at that, seeing what sort of perhaps sources they cite. You know, when I read like a particular claim on that, I'm like, huh, I did not know that. Like, like how strong is the evidence? I'm not sure I really buy this. And like, you know, looking into that further. And so yeah, and I think it very much does test your fit for like, yeah, what's it like studying this subject at university? Will I like actually enjoy it? Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jason. Jonathan.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to come back on that because Jason's made such an important point there, right? When you're doing your supercurricular exploration, I want you to think about reverting to being a 4-year-old. And I have a 4-year-old at the moment, so this is very dear to my heart. Literally everything that happens in his life is like, why, how, why, when, why. And you know, to an extent, academics are a bit like that, only hopefully it's marginally less irritating. Yeah, you know, what we're doing is consistently being interested in that question of why, and actually having a little person who is persistently saying why do is actually, I mean, you know, joking all apart, it's an absolute delight. You know, it's a similar sort of thing being an academic. We're kind of like children who've never grown up, who really just love asking why all the time. And so when you're doing your reading, when you're doing your exploration, what Jason's just said to you is spot on the money. It's not just taking the thing in, it's thinking, why?
I believe we call that Socratic method in philosophy, Jonathan.
You may be right.
I'll make a note of that, and I'll research it later after this call. Catherine, what did you do in preparation, be that for admission tests, exams, or interview? Share that with us, please.
Yeah, so I kind of only really decided that I wanted to apply to Oxbridge maybe in like the summer of year 12, so just going into year 13, and I was a bit tentative about it. I was like really nervous about failure, but finally my teacher and me, I went to him and I was like, no, I think this is what I want to do. So then it was kind of reading around, and I had been like, I think listening to podcasts, especially for history, is like a really good way of just kind of engaging in like supercurricular that's also not too intense, which is quite nice. And then just kind of picking up some books and reading around it, Also, I would recommend Very Short Introductions. You know, that series of books on literally so many different, like literally on anything. And you know, they're still on my reading list now sometimes, just for like, you know, very basic introductions. But I think that's a really good way to dip into certain things. And for the HAT test, I would recommend doing as many practices as you can, which is like the history admissions test, which is like they give you really abstract sources because they don't want anyone to have ever come across them before. So they can seem quite daunting, but I think the earlier that you look at them and get to grips with what they can throw at you, the more at ease you'll feel in the actual exam. And then regarding interviews, I think it was just making sure that you've not put anything on your personal statement that you don't actually understand, because there'll be nothing more embarrassing than being in an interview and then them pulling you up on something just because you thought it sounded intelligent. I honestly think that is such a big thing. Like, never put anything on there that you're not comfortable talking about. So I think that would be my advice.
Thank you, Catrin. Diolch yn fawr I ti am y onestrwydd di, Sandy.
Just to add to that point on the very short introductions, they are fantastic guides to help you get used to a subject, especially if you don't know a lot about it or if you're diving into a new area. Much like Jason was looking at Wikipedia articles. But my big hint with these is don't use those as the end of the story for your supercurricular study. When you read a section in which you find something really interesting, as Jason was saying with his articles, go and read the book that it was based on, check on that evidence. That's what's going to show the real depth of study that we're looking for. Short introductions and things like that are great roadmaps to doing supercurricular study. If you're going to buy one book, it's a great one to buy, but then start to dive just a little bit deeper into that, and that's what's going to help you get to that next level, just like a university student.
Ardderchog, gwych. Jacques, now I'm sure you've talked in the past about the importance of past papers and some resources that you liked using. Can you tell us, obviously maths is your subject, tell us what kind of things you did?
Right, so yes, the admissions tests are hard, and they're not like anything you will have seen before for the vast majority of people who are about to take them. So the best way that I've found, you know, consistently to be, you know, an approach you'd want to take is to start doing them, to take a real hands-on approach and get involved with them. And it's not unusual that the first paper you do, you fail miserably at. And when I say fail miserably, that'll be comparatively to what you're used to in school, possibly. You know, people who are applying to Oxford will be people who in school are used to getting those top grades and who are used to overwhelming success in their academics. But as soon as you reach one of these admissions tests, it's likely going to be a hurdle that'll take a bit more work to get over. And I think it's important not to be put off at that hurdle and to be persistent with it, because there's a huge sort of element of style in these questions. And the more that you attempt these kind of papers, the past papers, the more familiar you get with those styles, and the more you kind of come to understand the structure of these questions. What are they asking me? What do they want me to do? And you know, the resources that you have will vary between different courses. For example, I know that for maths, all of the papers back to 2007 are on the website currently, and all of the mark schemes are also on the website currently, alongside a couple of specimen papers. But at least when I was applying, I know that physics, although they had a lot of past papers up, did not have solutions up. So although your situations will vary, people will all be in the same situation as you. So I think making the most out of those resources is a really important approach to have. And definitely past papers are just a way to really get stuck in early. You know, I'd recommend people do as many as they can of those past papers. And as a small note for people studying maths specifically, but I'm sure that the sentiment is possibly shared among subjects. If there are many past papers, start with the early past papers and work your way forward. The standard of applicants, I feel, has gotten better over years, and we need them to be challenged more by these admissions tests, is what it seems like to me. I'm sure that Jonathan or Sandy could elaborate on that possibly. But for maths especially, if you were to start with the newest papers and work your way back, it's very easy to gain a false sense of accomplishment in the rate that you're progressing, because the papers have progressively gotten harder over the last decade or two. And it's a sort of a real thing that you need to bear in mind. But I think that's probably my main piece of advice for the MA team.
Thank you, Jacques. When that question on past papers came in, I knew exactly that I was going to direct it towards you, because I remember in the past us having a discussion on that and how important you felt that element was in giving you the confidence to move forward. Jonathan, did I see your hand up? Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to try and pick up a little bit on what Jacques was saying there, because I really, again, I cannot agree with it enough. I think that is, strategically, both the idea of starting early and also, not being put off. And this is particularly, I think it's important around the science side of things, folks, where often maths is a kind of prerequisite, almost whichever science you're studying. It's not uniformly true, but maths is very commonly a component of, for example, economics, of computer science, of engineering, of physics, of mathematics. And for any of those subjects that I've just mentioned, you could go and have a look at math past papers and have a look at model solutions, and that would be a great supercurricular activity. Similarly, if you feel that you're running out of enough maths to do, right, like the math past papers, STEP past papers are available, I think, almost in decades worth of stuff, inclusive of model answers and guides to working through this by an amazing chap whose name was Stephen Siklos, right? It can often be, I think, really daunting for people on the science side of the spectrum to think, what's my supercurricular activity going to be? Because if you're doing English, you pick up a book. If you're doing maths, what do I do? The answer is exactly what Jacques has just said. You do problems and you do them regularly, and you don't be daunted if you find it challenging. And the more you do that, A, the better prepared you'll be for interview, because that's what you're going to be doing in your interviews, problems like that. You're just going to be talking about them. And B, you're going to be better prepared for your admissions assessment, whether it's the MAT, the PAT, the TMUA for economics or computer science at Cambridge, whatever it may be. So on the science side of things, find these problem resources. Isaac Physics, I want to study engineering.org, STEP past papers, crack on with that. That's your supercurricular right there. Thank you, Jacques. That's brilliant stuff.
Great. Before we go to the probably last question, Sandy, do you want to add something to that?
And a very brief but important point to add to that. Admissions assessments can change year on year with Oxford, Cambridge, and any other university. So do make sure you check the details of which admissions assessments are required and the registration deadlines for them throughout the admissions process. If you check it just after this conference, there may be some changes once all the new details for the new admissions round starts in sort of January, February, March time. Give it another check over around June time to make sure that nothing has changed because of some sort of internal oddities that may have happened in any given year. So do bear in mind that over the next couple of years that we are likely to see some changes within some or all of the admissions assessments across universities, and be ready for those when they happen.
Very valuable piece of advice there. Keep an outlook on what's happening and keep checking those sites and whatever there's there to support you. This probably might be the last question. See how the clock goes now, but I want to start with you, Jason. We've heard so much today about the challenging situations, about, don't be worried about the fear of failure. This question is a great one. Is Oxbridge worth the extra effort of its application process? Is it worth it? And what is it like, Jason? How would you sum that up from your point of view?
Yeah, I think, if I remember sort of, Sandy's impassioned speech about, working with world-class academics, having access to, all these great resources, if that sounds like something that you want and, you go for it, 100%. There's so many extracurricular societies here, so many different things that you can do. Having access to all those opportunities, 100% worth it. Yeah.
Katrin, how would you sum it up? All the hard work and all the effort.
I think, well, firstly, on a practical note, I think it's always good to get your application in on early, and then you can focus on other things. So I think regardless if you don't get in, the process is going to make you a better academic student regardless. Doing the test, if you're lucky enough to get an interview, that's such an amazing experience in and of itself. So I think on a practical level, 100%. And then in terms of actually coming here, I do think definitely on the academic side, and you know, it is like worth it. You know, you get like one-on-ones or two-on-ones like every week with really lovely shooters. I've not come across any that are horrible, which is nice. So yeah, no, so I do think it is worth it, but also it depends on what you want out of your uni life. You know, I've been and visited other friends at unis, and it is different, so you've got to kind of assess what you want out of your uni experience. Yeah.
And really, the time is ticking away. If you could sum it up in a few words, Jack, for us.
Right, so again, just adding to that practical note, especially for maths, and I'm sure it applies to other subjects, that admissions test that you'll take, the preparation that you'll do for that I think singularly helped me the most in my degree. You know, the kind of techniques and dedication that I learned from studying towards those admissions tests has helped me become a far greater mathematician than I ever would have been otherwise. And I think regardless of where you study, that preparing for the admissions test, that process is invaluable regardless. As for studying at Oxford or Cambridge, you know, it depends on what you want. You know, like Sandy said earlier, if these kind of things, speaking with world-class leading experts on your field, is something that you're interested in, is something that you want to be you, if, you know, having dedicated time to your subject, if that's the main part of your day, is that something you're excited by? Is that something you want to do? If so, then I think absolutely Oxford or Cambridge is the right place for you. It will push you in ways you didn't know you could be pushed, but the reward that you get from it, if you've got that passion for your subject, will be enormous. So it always depends on you, but if that sounds like you, then I think absolutely.
Ardderchog, I'm glad nobody's hand is up again. We will draw this to a close. Thanks all of you for being so passionate and for not making this feel challenging for me in asking those questions to you all. Thanks for our conversation on this subject. And I really wish everybody who's listening and watching, we wish you well. Believe in yourselves. There is so much support and there are resources out there. Use your Seren contacts. Visit the universities in the exhibition space, but also remember your hub coordinators are there to guide you elsewhere. Pob lwc i bawb. Thanks very much, you panel members, ac hwyl fawr am y tro. Bye for now.